There you go. Good afternoon, everyone. The Faura Project is an organization of faculty, alumni, current students, and friends of UP Manila, bound by a common cause, which is to revitalize and sustain the rich cultural and historical heritage of Ermita, particularly along Faura Street and its environs. Its interest goes beyond the street of Calle Faura, though, as it promotes other heritage-laden streets and their advocates in the country and other parts of the world. So the Faura Project does so, knowing that much can be learned in other people's experience of street heritage zones and its conservation. So our activity today is also most time as we celebrate the International Day of World's Indigenous Peoples, which is observed on August 9 each year, to promote and protect the rights of the world's indigenous population. So we will be accompanied today by our guest, a Filipina now based in Plymouth, New Zealand, where she works in a museum for the Maori indigenous people. So this museum was built on Maori land, and in fact, the street where this museum is located is called Ariki, which in Maori means chief, or the Maori chieftain. So with much enthusiasm, let me introduce to you our guest today. So our guest is currently the manager for visitor experience at Puke Ariki Museum, Library, and Visitor Information in New Plymouth District Council, Taranaki, New Zealand. She has held this position since December 2015. So she leads and integrates visitor experiences in the museum and library center. In the same position, she also co-leads the overall institution of the Puke Ariki, maintain and build relationships with the stakeholders and members of the community to foster partnership and collaboration. So previous to this, she was a museum guide, then later duty manager at the Auckland War Memorial Museum from September 2011 to 2015. But before she migrated to New Zealand, she was grants officer and culture and arts officer at the National Commission for Culture and the Arts, Manila. So that's around 2001 to 2008. And it was during this period that she was lecturer for the BA Philippine Arts, Cultural Heritage and Arts Management program at the University of the Philippines Manila, where she taught courses on Philippine arts and arts management. So around the same period, she also taught in De La Salle College of St. Benilde School of Design and the Arts. So of course, more than anything else, so our guest is a BA Philippine Arts, Cultural Heritage and Arts Management Program alumna of the University of the Philippines Manila, where she graduated with honors and with the Best Thesis Award in 2001. And lastly, her interest includes heritage studies, nonfiction reading, and nature walks. They have a lot of that in New Zealand, sustainable gardening, and of course, learning the Maori language and food. So without further ado, let me introduce to you Ms. Ella Santos, Santos, otherwise known as Prunes. So good afternoon, Prunes. Good evening in New Zealand. Yes.
Good afternoon to all of you. Is my audio clear?
Yes, you're very clear.
Thank you for that introduction. And I guess part of my workplace now is the area of interest, not just the street, but the whole museum itself and the whole site itself is an interesting conversation in regards to heritage. And it's very fitting that we are celebrating Indigenous Peoples Day. And I think I'll be delving a little bit about some concepts of Maori that relate to heritage. And what I'm hoping to have, what I'm hoping for us to, as a format in this webinar, is for this to be more of a conversation. So if at any point there's something, I mentioned a word that you're not sure about or sounds foreign, please let me know. Stop me so I can explain it a bit further. So I guess my focus is on Ariki Street. Let me see if I could start sharing my screen. So normally since I've been here since 2008, I have assimilated a lot of ways that Maori do when in a lot of ways, in a lot of aspects, including in starting in a meeting. Normally there would be a pepeha. A pepeha is a form of introduction, and I guess I would like to start off with how a pepeha might look like, because this is very important when it comes to heritage conversations, and because it talks about where the person comes from, what's important to them, and what is their connection and their relationship with their environment and their ancestry. Similarly, when we Filipinos meet each other for the first time, pag meron kang bago nakilala, tatanungin mo, saan ka nakatira? Ano ang probinsya mo? And so forth. Sino mga magulang mo? Because we're trying to create connections. And a pepeha does that. And we'll see later on kung paano siya nagkumokonekta sa heritage ng New Zealand. So, before I go to my pepeha, ito yung topics na gusto ko sanang i-cover with our time this evening. So I'd like to do a brief sweep on the heritage of New Zealand, who looks after heritage, some Maori customary concepts pertaining to the care of heritage, because this is very ingrained in their culture. They have concepts about guardianship, concepts about treasures and what to do with these treasures. And these are all part of the language. And the focus of my presentation will be on Puke Ariki. And as Levy said, it is the hill. Puke is means hill, and chiefs is Ariki. And one thing that I would like to mention while learning Maori, there's a lot of similarities between the Filipino and the Maori language because of our common Austronesian ancestry. And so oftentimes when I hear some words in Maori, I have to think in Maori rather than thinking about it in Filipino. Otherwise, it colors my frame, or it colors my thinking about the word. So, and then I'll be talking about the past site, then and now, and its current significance, and the current state, and also Q&A. So this is a standard, this is the format of a pepeha. And normally, they would talk about their affiliation and their, is that okay? Can you see the presentation?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. So they will talk about their connection to their mountain, their river, the waka, kung saan sumakay yung mga ancestors nila. There's the ancestral waka. And each, if you think about Maori with different tribes, each tribe would have their own meeting house. And that meeting house is a very sacred place to Maori. So I'll talk about I'll be referencing Puke Ariki as a large meeting house, Puke Ariki now as a large meeting house. So later on, we'll see how all of these connect, but this is a standard way of a person introducing themselves. And it again talks about who they are, who they're connected with, where they're from, and what's important to them, such as similarly to heritage. So my pepeha, I chose this slide for my pepeha because it best explains where I've come from. And what I often say is that I was born in the Philippines. I've been living in New Zealand since 2008. The Philippines, the early Maori and the Polynesians have a similar connection, and that's the Austronesian origin. And New Zealand is my new home now, New Plymouth, Taranaki. And I'm the Visitor Services Visitor Experience Manager of Puke Ariki, and my name is Ella Santos. So it is the name of the person that comes last. And it is, if you notice, I started broadly where I've come from, what's important to me. And that's just how the world of Maori works. The relationships of the different parts coming together, and you are the representative of that. So I guess that's the world of Maori works, and it's all about the relationships and your connection to your environment. So I feel very connected to this diagram, to this map, because it also illustrates the journey of the Maori coming from Taiwan thousands of years ago, and as they journeyed through Southeast Asia, east and west of Polynesia, and finally settling into New Zealand about 1230 CE. So that's the last place on Earth that have been populated. This is the top view of Taranaki, so slowly zooming into our area. Taranaki is the mountain there at the very center, snow-capped and dramatic around this time of year, being winter, in the middle of winter and spring. And it is sort of a circular province. So this is the outline of the region, and the mountain is the centerpiece of the province. And this is very important to the identity of the people. It has a strong influence to their cultural practices, in their storytelling, in the carving, and it has a very strong influence on the culture of the Maori. And again, this is isolated. It is off the beaten track. So if you look at the New Zealand map here, we are in the North Island and we have the South Island here. Taranaki is right there at the tip, western part of New Zealand. So this is the mountain, the majestic Mount Taranaki, and this has a status of a person. And oftentimes, the heritage of the iwi or the tribes in Taranaki associate themselves to this mountain. So it's like the beacon. If you're on the plane or if you're traveling by land, once you see the mountain, you know that you're nearly home. And just going through some of the carving styles that are unique to Taranaki. This is one of, if you look up Motunui Epa, that is a very important national heritage that is housed within Puke Ariki. That has a long story, just like it could be a good subject of a saga. So it was discovered in a swamp in Taranaki in the 1970s, and it was smuggled out of the country without iwi or government knowledge. It was sold to a collector based in Geneva. Daughter got kidnapped, was trying to sell the epa to ransom the daughter. It was discovered by a researcher of Puke Ariki that these panels, these are parts of a carving of a storehouse, discovered in an auction store, an auction shop, and 30 years later, with the government, these panels came home to Taranaki and was repatriated. So it was a huge celebration and in a huge effort to get these panels back. These are all carved by Taranaki carvers, and it costed about 4.5 million plus legal costs and 30 years to get these back. So again, the mountain is a very strong influence in the culture of Taranaki, and also the coast as a coastal province. So as you can see, all of the sinuous and very fluid bodies of these figures. And to someone who's trained in the Maori visual language, you can read this like a story. And these represents ancestry and the people who owned the pataka, these panels. And it also talks about, again, what's important to them. So it's a visual storybook. As I would put it plainly, it's a visual storybook. So these are the panels housed within Puke Ariki. These are, this would have been the storage of food or storage of very important personal artifacts complex owned by the chief and his family, or it could also be a communal storage. As we slowly dive into the past of Puke Ariki and the past site is the Maori village that I'll be talking about. I like using proverbs, and also to Maori, it is important that they connect to these proverbs because they believe that these are the language of the ancestors. These are the wisdoms and their ways of connecting the past. So to read it, whakatungarongo he tangata toitu he whenua hoki. People disappear, the land remains. And for Maori, the land is very important. They're affiliated to the land. It is their sense of belonging, and it's also their the place where they stand, and it is a very important element to their identity. You might be familiar with Laura Jane Smith. Her view of heritage really resonate with me. Because it talks about the physical, and also physical as one realm, but on the other hand, the intangible part of heritage, and the meeting of those, the intersection of those physical features and intangible part of heritage is the best way of explaining heritage from an indigenous point of view, especially to Maori, where you cannot separate the physical from the intangible aspect. So when they talk about the place, or when they come into a space, they don't only talk about the physical features of what's there, but they also sense what's there, what had happened, the stories and the events that have happened in a place. So a sense of place has a lot of those characteristics to Maori, and that's part of the storytelling. Just a brief sweep on who looks after heritage in New Zealand. So we have Heritage New Zealand. So this is the national agency for scheduling and looking after all the national heritage or heritage considered heritage important sites. Department of Conservation looks after all the natural cultural properties. There is a Maori Heritage Council, which is a partner of Heritage New Zealand. The iwi, or the tribes, the hapu, the community, and the local government all play a part in the protection of heritage. And I guess it's quite fitting to show you some of the concepts that are innate with Maori, that talks about how they value heritage and how they value what has the treasures that have been passed on to them by the ancestors. So they have a concept for taonga, treasured possession, taonga tuku iho. These are not only tangible but also intangible heritage that talks about the stories. These are the songs, including the very popular haka that we've seen when All Blacks perform. Those are all part of the taonga tuku iho, the things that are passed down, and the oral traditions, all of those are part of that. The Maori also have their way of managing the environment based on the Maori worldview, and this is the concept of kaitiakitanga. And this concept is coming out more now to share how to look after it from a Maori and not from a Western perspective. There are also sites which are considered wahitapu, which is a sacred place. Puke Ariki pa, I'll be talking about that, and that is considered a wahitapu, a site that is sacred because of the traditions, all the stories and the rituals, and just all of the because of that ancestral because of that ancestry, it is important to Maori and to the iwi where that belongs to. We also have Wahitupuna It's a place that's important to Maori for its ancestral significance, and it is associated with the cultural and traditional values. And we have the pa, which is a Maori village or a settlement. You might be curious how a pa looks like. I have some images here to share with you how a pa site looks like. And well, I was mentioning a while ago that the sense of place and the place itself is very important to Maori, and they have a word called Turanga Waiwai. It is a place where they stand. Puke Ariki, the pa site itself, the place where the museum stands, is the Turanga Waiwai of a tribe. And they are able to trace their ancestry or genealogy. And that is something that is quite, that is widely practiced and innate to Maori. They would like to trace their genealogy, where they have come from, as far back as they could. And talking about genealogy or whakapapa, this is the next concept. I'm very fascinated with this concept because from an indigenous point of view, they have their way of organizing, and it's a taxonomy of where things have come from. And for the world of Maori, it come from the Sky Father and the Earth Mother, and everything else, including any species, any animals or plants, would have come from a whakapapa. They would be able to trace where they have come from. So that, I think, is a very, it's a good way of viewing the world and the Maori contribution to thinking. Marae, it's a sacred place. And again, I'll be using that term to refer to the site where Puke Ariki now. Back to this, just to illustrate the journey of Maori. This is a map showing the distribution of pa sites in New Zealand. So the North Island has the most number of pa sites, and the red markings are pa sites less than 600 years ago. And the early pa sites more than 600 years ago are the ones in blue. North Island is a lot warmer, and if you are to, the Maori had come from the Pacific, and where the climate is more tropical, and so the intention is to find places which are more suitable to the environment and the climate of the Pacific. And so the higher you go in the North Island, the warmer it is. And Maori, being seafarer, and they are great navigators, they are drawn to the coast. So as you can see, a lot of the pa sites are dotted around the coastal areas. Right, so to continue, this is Puke Ariki Pa, an 1884 drawing. So the story of this pa is that it was populated around late 1700 by this tribe called Ngati Tifiti. And they, over 100 years, they lived in that pa site. Levy, is it all right to continue? Parang meron pang hindi pa nakaka-join.
Just a couple of, it's not, you can continue.
Okay, I'll pause. Should I pause?
No, continue. You may continue, please. It's all right.
How are we for time?
What time is it? It's 5:30, so you still have at least half an hour. Or...
Okay, good. So they lived in that pa site for I guess estimate there are no clear indications of the time frame, but they occupied that pa and left it because another tribe from south of Northern Ireland have invaded the pa site, or have caused for them to move to another area, which is now Wellington. So this is overlooking the pa site, another 1845 drawing by Francis Dillon Bell. And these are the documentations of how that pa would have looked like when the Europeans had come around the 1840s. So the pa had been vacated. bago dumating yung Europeans in New Plymouth. New Plymouth was one of the first waves of European or British migrants. There had been a very organized immigration system from Britain that brought people to populate Taranaki. And these people have been promised land, livelihood, and a good lifestyle. And they bought their way to immigrate to Taranaki. And so this was the PA site, and they traveled by large ships, which took months to travel from Great Britain to Taranaki. And so with another illustration of the Puke Ariki Pa, these are part of the collections of Puke Ariki. So here you can still see the elevation of the pa because it's a large mound. It's part of the natural topography of the area. It covers a few streets and it covers a very large area. So now I'll be showing you this is a model of a pa site. This is a Maori village, and as you recall earlier, they are situated near the water, and what they do is build trenches, and they have palisades around that and different dwellings and different structures around it. So as you go up the pa, the higher and the great prominence is located at the top. So this is usually where the chief lives, the chief's family, and a meeting house or a marae. And that's in a marae, that is where the important gatherings of the community is held, different ceremonies, union between people, and important discussions of the tribe takes place in a marae. This is a 3D model, the one here on the right. It's a 3D printed model of a pa site. And we have this marking here is a very important, it could be an important doorway or important representation of an ancestor. And as people go through this structure, it is a change in realm. It is coming from, if you're an outsider, you are considered to be stepping onto normal or non-sacred land. And as you cross this threshold, it is considered sacred land, and there are different protocols that are observed when you come into sacred land. So this one here is the meeting house or the main, or the marae, or the main gathering place. And one of these would have been the dwelling of the chief next to it. So back to Puke Ariki, when the Europeans arrived, it was called Mount Elliot, and they considered the pa site, or this whole massive mound, to be a hindrance to development, because there were structures that need to be built, housing, and the idea was to create a little Britain in every city that they settle. So that was the plan for Puke Ariki, and this one here is a photograph of men removing Puke Ariki or Mount Elliot, 1900. So it had been dramatically flattened. So if you were to imagine that to be different floors, it would have been a 5-floor building. That's how high the Puke Ariki pa site would have been. This is Puke Ariki pa site now. So the idea of the museum was started in 1995, and all the iwi or tribes within Taranaki, together with the local government of New Plymouth, came together and thought about creating a museum, not only to house the growing collection of the museum, which is housed in one room in the library, But also they wanted this to be a world's first, because it is the world's first integrated library, museum, and visitor information. And they also wanted this to be a fitting reminder of the past of this area. So again, in this photograph, the past site would have been exactly on this site. And this is the ocean right here, which is the main food source. And also they have the ability to, there would be lookouts here. If you would imagine this is the pa, a lookout, which gives them an idea kung meron bang mga dumarating from the horizon. This one is a river, another important food source, and another heritage and important river. And the past site would have spanned up to the edge of this river, or this cemented ground, and would extend far onto the streets. I mean, think about, I'll show you a map later on here. So think about 3 more streets. It is really that massive. So again, another image of the pa looking out from the other structure. So I'm standing here at the mall, which would have been another pa site. So another sub-tribe, different families would have lived on this pa, and they are separated by the river. So this is Ariki Street, looking from the air bridge. So the Puke Ariki pa site would have covered this area as well. It would extend out beyond these buildings, would extend up to the river runs across there. And so just imagine the magnitude and the size of that pa. So this is a map of the central business district now of New Plymouth. So Puke Ariki would have been here, the museum now. When I talk about Puke Ariki, I'm referring to the museum. The pa site would encompass all of this area up to here, up to Brown Street, just before this main street here. So it's one of the major and significant pa sites, not only in terms of size, but also it is where the chief of chiefs would have lived in New Plymouth, and also comparable to the other tribes in Taranaki. In terms of Ariki Street, I guess that whole pa site would give significance to Ariki Street, thus the name. I would like, before I go into this, I would like to show some current images of the pa site and what is inside. And I'd like to give you a little glimpse of the museum. Can you share, can you see these screens now? Can you see the images?
Yes, we can, Ms. Prunes.
Okay. So these are random images taken inside and outside of Puke Ariki, but they show different elements and reminders of its past, and I guess attributes that the place is considered a pa site, therefore a sacred site, and also a marae. A marae were important conversations would have had, or a special gathering, a place of special gathering among people. So this sculpture here is karanga. Typically in a marae, before a guest or new people would enter in a marae, and that's up to now, you have to be greeted by a female, and they do a form of a chant to welcome the person, to acknowledge the environment, to acknowledge the gods, to acknowledge the ancestors. And once you have been acknowledged, you're allowed in, and you are considered to be part of them. Hindi ka na ibang tao. So that is karanga, and that's what she stands for, the person calling or welcoming. So that's situated on the west side of the museum. This one here is Tukutahi, standing together. This one is a sculpture that's situated sort of in the middle of that flat area. This one signifies two people, two cultures pressing noses, and that is the hongi. A hongi is a way of exchanging essence by pressing noses. So that's how Maori would greet each other. And I guess the meaning of this, dahil nasa gitna na siya, nakapasok ka na, then the Maori would greet you, and it's like saying you are now one of us. We are welcoming you. So this is the foreshore, an important food source, and also the past site would have been. This is a reclaimed area. This part, the walkway, is now a reclaimed area. And the past site would be looking out to this beautiful view. This one is the ceremonial entrance. So if you remember earlier, there was an archway to the past site, a very beautifully and intricately carved pathway. This one is a reference to that. This is a ceremonial entrance which is only used if we have any new artifacts coming through, or if we have new staff that are starting, then they would have come through this doorway. So that is the threshold where to somehow signify the change in status from normal to sacred space. And this one is so the archway. Inside the museum, we have the names of place names and references to the history of the past site, and also the connection to the environment, not just only on Ariki Street, but it also references the mountain. It references the different natural features of Taranaki. This name here, Rangi Apitirua, this is the chief of Ariki, of the past site. More views of the interior of the museum. Again, there are references of the different places. Paritutu, that is the sugar loaf or the rock formations. Paiare is another name of a place. So these are all references, and at the moment, what the team at Puke Ariki are doing, and we are learning from people from the iwi or from the tribe. We're learning all about the names of these around the foyer, because our hosts, that is their workspace, and oftentimes they get asked by visitors, what do those names mean? And these are all reminders of the past of Puke Ariki and what it was before. And it's funny how there are a lot of elements within the building and outside the building that are often ignored. But now that we are looking at it as a past site and a marae, and we're unearthing all of these stories about the heritage of the place, it's all making sense. It's all a big story. It's like a big puzzle clicking its place. So more photos of the interior. And so these stairs lead to the Takapo Fariki, or the Maori Gallery. There was a special reason why Takapo Fariki had been chosen where it was now. It's because ito yung tirahan ng chief. This is the dwelling place. Kaya ito yung pinili to be the site of the Maori treasure. So a lot of the carvings and artifacts from the Taranaki region are stored here on this level. These are the inside of the carved doors. You would remember in previous slides that I've shown you, those are the exterior. And again, these are the interior, and these carvings here reference to the ancestors and the genealogy and the people who have lived in the past site. Again, all of the reminders around in and out of the building, reminding of the heritage and the stories that the place holds. More names. I think there are about 20 odd names around the foyer. And sometimes they're easily ignored. And for the longest time, when I first got there in 2015, I wondered what the names were. And there was little knowledge and understanding about the stories here, and little by little, and that is the beauty of working in visitor experience and also being an inquisitive person. So why don't we unearth what these names mean? And what is the connection of these names to Puke Ariki or Taranaki? And these names were deliberately placed where they are because of their significance, because they all serve as clues to the stories that were in the place. So more names, Sarangya Pitirua, and this is the exterior. Again, another clue here to what Puke Ariki is trying to achieve is this woven wall. The woven wall seemed to signify people coming together, or the interwoven and the connections of coming together. So again, Maori being big and important sa kanila ang connection and relationship of all things. Mapabagay or ibon, halaman, lahat yan magkakakonekta, lahat mahalaga. Guess those are all of the images. Any questions at this stage? Before I go to current and next steps.
Anyone? Questions? So far, so good.
Okay.
None. Thank you.
So I'll be sharing the current and next steps. Can you see this slide?
Mm-hmm.
Can you see the current state and next step slides?
Yep.
Yes, Miss Prunes.
Yep. Okay. I'm always second guessing myself with Zoom kasi very rusty na ako with Zoom. So as I've mentioned earlier, knowing all that past, we're in the process within my team and within Puke Ariki and unearthing all of these stories. So it's still quite new to us. I guess for a few years now, we've been walking around and walking past all of those sculptures that I've pointed out, all the carvings and the names. And it is only recently that we have strongly developed the need to really get to know all of these and develop that strong awareness about the heritage of the place so that we can advocate for its significance. Although the site is considered by the community, when I say the community, the iwi, and part of that also is the local government, it is considered as a heritage and important site. And when we talk about heritage of New Plymouth, the Puke Ariki past site or the Puke Ariki are one of the things, is one of the things that comes to mind. But they only know it because of the museum, because the library is there, because of the important cultural artifacts that we hold in our collections, but not so much, but not as deep as knowing the stories of the past site and knowing the stories and the development of Maori in the area. So that's something that we are trying to look into, and we're trying to deepen our awareness of its heritage and its significance. And we're hoping that we are able to develop strategies to embed this within the organization. How how can we make this part of onboarding, making sure that the staff members that join us are aware of this and would become part of our advocates in talking about what the PA is all about, because it's a very important departure in talking about Taranaki, in talking about culture and heritage and what the place is all about. And so we need to do a lot of internal reflection, internal research, but also we have to do a lot of Maori engagement and conversations with them, because we have to remember that these are their stories, this is their heritage, and we need to be given the mandate to share this widely and use it respectfully, tell it respectfully. And how do we do that is by asking Maori, not us telling them or not us identifying it for them. And sometimes engagement with Maori is not just one meeting. We have to build a relationship that is several cups of tea, several coffee and visits, so that we can get to know each other. And that's how trust is also developed. And that's a form of community engagement that we need to embark. I guess we've got to build that foundation so that there is that continuous collaboration, so that whatever comes out of our initiatives within our organization, within our community, we have the local Maori support, and we have them backing us at the same time. And I guess the last thing that, as when I talk about community participation, these are the programs that Puke Ariki would develop. These are public programs, the ways that we can engage our community, the ways that we can share the knowledge with them, so that they too can develop a sense of connection to the place and find their sense of belonging, and how they and the way that they could connect to the stories. An insight to the population of New Plymouth is that it is 84% European, so it's a very white, very Western demographic. I guess 14 to 18% Maori, and the rest are Asians. I often find myself as the only Asian in the room, but that's all right. That is, I'm the diversity voice oftentimes, and I see both worlds. I see the differences and the opportunities for Maori and I guess the Western perspective, how they could intersect and collaborate. So I often find myself as a bridge in some situations. Yeah, so I guess these are not linear steps to undertake, but some of them happen simultaneously. But what's very important is Maori are consulted, that we treat them as partners and not as recipients, or not as the last to know what's happening. And I guess that's one failure of Indigenous engagement, is that it often happens to them and rarely that they become part of a process. And I guess just a little clue and a little prompt for me. I guess a lot of you would be wondering and have seen the All Blacks haka. Mm-hmm. And I guess that's one of the, you would view it as an entertainment, but to Maori, that is a very special way of challenging their opponents. Some of them would be wishing death to their opponents, or defeat, of course, as you would. And it has a lot of ways to intimidate them. So if you look at, or if you search All Blacks, and recently in the Olympics, I'm not sure if it was public, that the Sevens, the female rugby, the women rugby team had performed a haka. And it is not very customary, and it is not often that you would find women doing a haka. But in this situation, I guess that's part of culture evolving. And according to one of my sources, it looks like that the haka was created especially for them. So it's not only a war dance, but it could also mean that it is a way of celebrating, a way of farewelling, a way of expressing very strong emotions. And when Puke Ariki was opened in 2003, part of the stories that the community who were there could not forget how powerful the haka was. So if you were part of, if you were amongst that, and I have felt that, it's a hair-raising experience, and it's a really emotional experience that it nearly drives me to tears to be experiencing all that emotion and all that intensity. So I guess one of the assignments of, I guess, after this is to have a look at haka, or look at All Blacks haka or Maori haka to see an example. And I hope you you feel that intensity watching it. And I hope one day when you come to New Zealand to experience it and be part of that welcoming process. I guess that concludes my presentation. A lot of context building, and hopefully that has hit the mark and gave you some ideas or some questions.
Oh.
All right. So thank you so much, Ms. Santos, for that wonderful talk. You know, it's amazing that we've been learning so much about the heritage of other countries as well. So for those who weren't able to attend our last webinar, we had the opportunity to learn more about the culture of Adelaide, its history, and how it's doing right now during the pandemic. And for this session, we had the opportunity to learn about Ariki Street in New Zealand. It's definitely been such a great adventure. You know, even though we're stuck at home, we still get to feel like we're traveling the world through the stories of our wonderful speakers. So again, thank you so much, Ms. Prunes.
So I'll turn you over now to our convener, Dr. Achanzar-Labor.
Lucha, you want any more? Dirachin ko na siya, no? So, and of course, thank you, Professor Bonilla, first for your presence, no? And second, for conducting the question and answer section of today's activity, you know? So, and as you said, no, we cannot, thank less, no? Everyone who presented questions, no? Everyone, no need to say, you know who they are, and because these questions, as well as the insights, no, which made our discussion really much more engaging. No? And of course, we thank most especially our guest, no, Ms. Prunes Santos, who has served as our eyes, no, to a heritage which we have long been wanting to know more about, no, especially after we learned that she now lives at the very heart, no, of Taraniki Maori culture. No? So our celebration of the International Day of the World's Indigenous People couldn't have been done any better. No? So, and thank you all for simply being here today. No? Since this is what inspires us to further our advocacy of promoting heritage cities and streets. No? So your interest in the matter keep us going, no? And are putting premium value to pride of place. No? So we formally end today's event. No? Looking forward to seeing you again in our future activities. Please make sure to regularly check our Facebook page for updates.